Hello, everybody. FAI here, I here, and welcome to a bit of a longer form Let's Talk video and kind of a discussion, in my opinion, for what's been recently happening with F1. Now, of course, the gameplay you will be seeing is, of course, F1 Manager 24 that's going on in the background, and I thought that this might help just to kind of offset the talk in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, let's talk about some of the changes that are happening with F1 going on in 2025, and that is mainly in today's discussion Red Bull and how I think that Red Bull is making a mistake with their second driver slash second seat going into 2025 season, and that is who's pairing up with Max Verstappen. Now, as many of you have already heard, you probably know that Liam Lawson is going in to be the second driver for Max Verstappen into Red Bull as of 2025. And even though Yuki Tsunoda did get a Red Bull test, I think it was never going to happen that he was going to actually land the seat. But here's my reasoning why I think Liam Lawson is actually a mistake going forward, and they really should have probably just kept Sergio Perez. Now, generally, as many of you know, of course, Sergio Perez was not doing too well, especially going into the beginning of the 2024 season and, of course, leading into the midway slash summer break. But they did end up, for some reason or another, giving him another contract. And, of course, was this a good idea, in my opinion? I mean, obviously, I think yes, to a degree, because he did have stability. But obviously, according to Red Bull, he just wasn't at all performing in the way that he expected to be performing. And I think that's generally what shut him down from Red Bull's position slash seeding overall. But I think that this also was a bit of a mistake on Red Bull's part because of the factor that Red Bull really was trying to just find someone who could help them basically continue winning Constructors' Championships and maybe even helping Max Verstappen become another championship or just becoming an undefeatable champion. I think that with Liam Lawson coming in, it's going to be another kerfuffle of Red Bull making a mistake of thinking that they are going to bring in one of their junior drivers who has the prospect of being a great driver, and Liam Lawson will fall short. Now, I've had a lot of thought about this. I've had a lot of consideration, and I've just thought about this before, and for a very long time. And here's my reasoning why. First of all, we have to look at the backstory slash backhand of all of the other previous prospects for Red Bull that were coming in to replace Liam Lawson to be the second driver for Max Verstappen. First of all, we had, of course, Alexander Albon, who fell short. We also had, of course, a lot of other people before Sergio Perez that came in. And, of course, when Sergio Perez came in, of course, we had seen Red Bull find its stride, find its success. And, of course, with Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen won, as we all know, his first championship and subsequently many constructor championships after that. But then we had the kerfuffle of RB and Red Bull making the decision to bring Nick DeVries in. Now, of course, I don't think Nick DeVries was a bad choice for Red Bull. I think maybe, given time, Nick DeVries could have actually been a very good driver. It's just that under the pressure of Red Bull, especially considered that Red Bull wanted a driver who could perform, they ended up putting too much pressure on Nick DeVries to actually perform as he was expected to perform, and thus leading to the Kimi Räikkönen, well, not Kimi Räikkönen, sorry, Daniel Ricciardo replacement. But I mean, where was Yuki Tsunoda in all this? Obviously, as it is, Yuki Tsunoda never came in at the beginning being a prospective great driver. In fact, he was one of those drivers that kind of just were scuffed by Red Bull, especially after he got into RB, or as it was back then, AlphaTauri. And I think that's the reason why, when we think about it and when we look back at, like, for instance, Mr. Yuki Tsunoda's record, it's like, yes, he's improved drastically. He's become a great driver. But the reason he stayed on RB and the reason he's still with Red Bull is because Honda made a deal with Red Bull to keep him on. And at this point, obviously, we know that Red Bull is only keeping him as a seat warmer until someone better comes into play. And I think that's the main thing, is when we look at it, Red Bull are only looking at Yuki Tsunoda as a seat warmer, as someone who will keep the seat warm until somebody better comes around. So, let's face it, given everything, Yuki Tsunoda deserves a chance on the Red Bull. And, obviously, as we've seen, especially from his driver testing with Red Bull, he has driven very well. Could he be a good teammate to Max Verstappen? Possibly. Could he learn a lot from Max Verstappen and maybe become better? Maybe become faster? Maybe become someone that could challenge for championships later on? Absolutely, in my opinion. But at this point, Red Bull really are only looking at him as a seat warmer. And I think this is why I believe Liam Lawson will fall short and will fail inevitably. Now, let's face it, I don't think that Liam Lawson is a bad driver. I don't think that he's overhyped. I don't think he's just someone like Nick DeVries. But I do believe he is someone who's going to come from the Red Bull family and the Red Bull Junior team, and it's going to be another kerfuffle of Red Bull Junior team just failed at finding or making a great driver. And that's the problem, is Red Bull is, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, Red Bull has gotten such a great all-star driver in Max Verstappen, it's hard to believe that anyone else will ever be as good as him. I mean, you look at the Red Bull family before, and you look at the Red Bull family from the past, let's face it, Sebastian Vettel, another championship caliber driver, another great driver. But the problem is, Sebastian Vettel was never going to hold the candle to Max Verstappen. I think that if Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel were to race as teammates, it would be another Mark Webber versus Sebastian Vettel kerfuffle. And that's just the way I look at it. Heck, it could have been a Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton kerfuffle, where it would have been hard to control the team, and it would have been hard to figure out who was going to be the driver that of course Red Bull was going to focus on. But that's just the reason why I think Liam Lawson will probably fail. Now, I'm not saying that Liam Lawson isn't going to perform. He may actually perform well. We don't know just yet. But I generally think that Liam Lawson will be put into the Red Bull seat. He'll have too much pressure on him to actually perform, especially on his rookie year. And it's just going to end up being another kerfuffle of Alex Albon or, someone else who came from the junior family and failed inevitably. Pierre Gasly, for instance. And I'm sorry I couldn't think of Pierre Gasly at the beginning of this video. But, that's the reason why I think generally it's going to be a case of Red Bull have made another kerfuffle. And while Red Bull were hoping to bring in, of course, Daniel Ricciardo, I think personally, should have just retired back after his McLaren stint. But, I mean, Daniel Ricciardo, I think, generally overstayed his welcome and overstayed his overall place as an F1 driver as the people got more skilled and as the younger generation started to drive and come in. I think also he had a problem with adapting to the newer regulations and the newer cars. I mean, I think that's something that Daniel Ricciardo struggled with, especially as we saw him leave Red Knot. He kind of struggled with being able to adapt to the newer cars and the newer setups. I think that since we're also talking about Daniel Ricciardo and some of Red Bull's kerfuffles and problems that they had, we also have to take into consideration that Daniel Ricciardo probably wasn't in the right mindset. Because again, remember that Daniel Ricciardo left Red Bull when he was still at the top of his game. When he was still technically the lead driver that Red Bull was looking to build around. And I think that even though Daniel Ricciardo left because Max Verstappen was beating him at the time, the question remains, and this is a question that I think maybe you should ask yourself and maybe think about, is could Daniel Ricciardo really beat Max Verstappen? Because, let's face it, Daniel Ricciardo wanted to come back to Red Bull family and wanted to come back to Red Bull because maybe he thought he had a chance at beating Max Verstappen. But we all know that at this point in time, Max Verstappen has control of the team. We all know that the car is being built around his specific setup, how he likes to drive. And if Daniel Ricciardo couldn't adapt to Max Verstappen back then, when he was just getting started and when he was still a very young driver, what makes Daniel Ricciardo, especially even though he is kind of retired now, think that he could beat Max Verstappen now that he's a championship caliber driver? And that's just a question that you have to consider and think about. But anyway, with that having been said, if you like this video, don't forget to give this video a like, and I'll see you all in the next one. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit the follow button if you haven't already, and hit the bell notification if you like videos like this and you want to see more videos like this. But anyway, with that having been said, thank you everyone for joining me, and I'll see you all in the next one.